Thank you, Jeff. I don't know if you noticed or not, but the choir's not here. They're off on their retreat learning music for us in the weeks to come. And that's a blessing to have people who can step in and do things like Jeff does for us and some of the rest of us. You know, I have really been loving the study on the Beatitudes, and it may be because the Gospel of Matthew is my favorite of the four Gospels, and I'll be honest, that's rooted in some pride from seminary. It's probably a sin, but I'll get over it. I hope you do too. I've loved this study on the Beatitudes because one of the things that I believe to be true is that the things we focus on is what we become. So if we focus on the Beatitudes, if we focus on what it means to be blessed, and if we focus on becoming blessings, then we will become all of those things. Now, some of you are going, well, I'm not sure that's true. Well, just answer this question for me. How many of you have ever known somebody whose every word or every sentence or every thought begins with, I can't, I don't, I won't, I shouldn't, or any other negative word? You ever know somebody like that? And did you ever wonder how they became like that? Well, I'm going to tell you how they became like that. They became like that because they focused their entire life and their entire day on everything that went bad or wrong. And I have to tell you, I'm going to tell you a story about one person just so you understand what this looks like. I have a friend who I've never really heard her say anything really positive. In fact, it got to the point where she actually came to me and she was telling me all of her problems and all of her struggles and all of her life, and I went, hold it, time out. I have an assignment for you. Next week, when you come to see me, I want you to bring a list of every good thing that happens to you this week. I don't think anything good's going to happen this week. I said, just try it. So she went home, and sure enough, she came back the next week. And I said, so, let me see your sheet of paper with your list of good things that happened this week. And she handed me her fortune cookie. And it said, be wary of what's about to happen. My friends, I honestly believe that one of the great truths in life is that we do become what we focus on. And that's why we're focusing on the Beatitudes. That's why it's important for us to see and to hear the good news again and again and again. Because if we are to become like Jesus, we have to put our eyes on Jesus and focus on Jesus and listen to what he says for us to do and be. Otherwise, we'll never hit the target. We'll never become who he has called us to be. Now, in these Beatitudes, I'm going to tell you there are two different types or two different categories. There are 4 Beatitudes, the first 4, that help us understand and talk about our relationship with God. Blessed are the poor in spirit. That is about admitting our need for God. And then the second four are really His way and His description of how we build relationships with one another. And so I have a question for you today. How many of you in the room today have every relationship and it's perfect in every way? All right, I get to finish the sermon. Because if you had raised your hand, we'd have gone and had coffee. But it's too late now. Jesus says, as we start this, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." In other words, if you want to be blessed, we have to be merciful. Now that sounds good. How many of you like to receive mercy? It's a trick question. Because if you want to receive it, then you have to give it. And if you're going to have it, you have to live it. You see, he says other things along these lines. But what is mercy exactly? Well, sometimes it's easier to know what something is by figuring out what it isn't. So here's what mercy is not. Mercy is not a sentimental feeling. It is not being sympathetic. James chapter 2, verses 15 and 16 tell us that when he says, "Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes or daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm, and be well fed,' but you do nothing about their physical needs, what good is it?" In other words, mercy is about meeting needs so that people can have what they need to have to live. And mercy is also not just about what it is we do. It's not just about the deed, because that Greek word for mercy, the Greek word is, by the way, eleos. It's E-L-E-O-S, and that'll be on the test later. This is a word that describes for us a very specific attribute of God. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 4, we're told that God is rich in mercy, eleos. In Titus, we're told we are saved by God's mercy, eleos. And Peter tells us that in God's great mercy, He has given us new birth into a living hope. Also, the word for mercy is eleos. And this word eleos, when it's taken out of the Bible and when it's taken out of Jesus' mouth, means 2 or 3 real specific kinds of pictures that I bet you'll get. How many of you have ever had a bedroom or a kitchen or a living room that you came in and you looked at it and said, "My gosh, this place needs a paint job"? You ever do that? Yeah. And when you paint that room, what does it look like? Fabulous. That's one of the ways that this word is used. Another way that this word can be used, and I think is the way Jesus uses it most often, is eleos is a way to cancel a debt. Any of you ever have any debt? Any of you ever get it canceled? That's not true. Each and every one of you, if you are a believer in Jesus, have received the greatest debt-canceling service of all. It's called Jesus on the cross. Amen. And Jesus on the cross is God's most merciful act to us. And it's a gift. And that merciful act leads us to do merciful acts. Acts of eleos. Acts of canceling out other people's debts. Acts of painting the walls of our relationships so they're clean and pure. Acts that change our very lives. You see, because mercy is actually best described as love in action. You see, one of the things that we in the church sometimes forget is that God's love for us, God's grace for us, God's salvation for us was not just for us. I tell people, you are not saved for nothing. You are all saved for something more than what's happening right now. Jesus died on the cross not just for Peter and Paul and James and John in the first century, or even for you or me, our grandparents, our parents, those people in the generations before us. But Jesus on the cross is the greatest act of mercy for those who come after us, and they know about it and hear about it and see about it in you and me. So what does it mean to be merciful? Well, I've got 4 things I want you to know that I think describe what mercy is, and you might want to write these down. Because I'm thinking some of you might want to know. First and foremost, I know it's in here somewhere. Lost my place, it happens. First and foremost, if we are merciful, we will be patient. Some of you laughed at that. If we are merciful, we will be patient, especially with the unique, the special, those who try our patience, those who drive us crazy. Any of you have people in your life that just drive you crazy? I didn't say to point at the person sitting next to you. And more than one of you. Rick Warren puts it this way: into every life must a few weirdos fall. And isn't it true? A few weirdos. And all they're looking for is a little attention. All they're looking for is someone to love them. All they're looking for is someone to just welcome them into their lives. You see, being merciful is about being accepting of other people. And we need to practice that. We need to practice being accepting and loving and encouraging. You know, merciful people, Paul says, accept one another in the Lord as Christ accepted you. So here's the question: has Christ accepted you? If that's a yes, then you're called to accept other people. It's one of the realities of the church that far too often gets ignored. Secondly, if we are merciful, we will forgive those who have failed. How many of you have ever known somebody who failed or sinned or fall fell short of God's glory. You ever know anybody like that? How many of you might fit that category yourself? Fallen a little short of God's glory? A lot. Every day, sometimes. You know, ask yourself this question. This is how you'll know whether you're merciful or not. When someone around you makes a mistake, fails, sins, even causes a problem, do you rub it in or rub it out? It's a great question, isn't it? Do you take that thumb of yours and push it in until they can't escape? Or do you wipe it clean like that white painted wall? You see, it's way too easy to rub it in, isn't it? It's way too easy to hold sin against people. I was reminded once, I had a phone call on a Sunday morning, and I'll be honest, I don't usually answer the phone on Sunday morning. Of course, now we have caller ID, so if it's somebody who's supposed to preach or teach or sing or something, I do answer it. But if it's just somebody that I don't know, I don't answer the phone. But on this particular day, it was before caller ID even, I had a phone call, and I was a youth pastor at this time. I didn't know any better. I happened to be preaching that day. The senior pastor was on vacation. And the voice at the other end was a local pastor. And he asked me if he and his wife could come to church that Sunday. I was young. I didn't know any better. I said, sure, come on. And then the very question kind of made me say, why do you ask? I should have asked first. No, I was really glad I didn't. Because he proceeded to tell me, well, the last 3 weeks he and his wife had been to church and been met at the door by pastors or elders and told that it would be better if they worshiped somewhere else. Their life was a mess. There was sin all over it. There were all kinds of problems. But my friends, if they can't find mercy in the church, if they can't find forgiveness in the church, then where are they going to find it? Merciful people, my friends, don't point fingers. They offer a lending hand, an encouraging hand. Number 3, if I am a merciful person, I'll help those who are hurting. One of the things that I see happening at First Christian Church Duncanville is when we have these Sundays where we talk about bringing a friend, I get asked more and more who somebody should bring. I think it's because most of us don't have any friends. But I never tell us that. No, I say, well, if you're really going to look for somebody to bring to the church whose life will be changed by God, who might need to know Jesus, who might need to be loved, find somebody who's in trouble. Find a single parent. Find a hopeless, homeless man. Find somebody who's in trauma in their lives. Now, I know none of you ever have trauma in your lives, right? Your lives are all perfectly placid and calm and together, and you never have any issues that might cause you to lose it. But all around you are people who are hurting. All around us are people who are crying out. I don't know if you've noticed in my newsletter article every week, I have closed it the same. I'm thinking maybe you all don't read it every week, because if you actually did read it every week, you would notice that I close it with the same sentence every week now for 3 months. I figured somebody would say, don't you have anything new to say? And no, I don't. No. And I'm not going to tell you what it says. It's at the end. There's your hint. Number 4. The merciful person will do good. By the way, this is the hard one. The first 3 are easy. The 4th one is hard. The merciful person will do good to their enemies. I just had a whole bunch of nods. Because you know what? We don't want to do good to our enemies. We don't want good things to happen to our enemies. But my friends, the best way to change an enemy is to make them your friend. And that means we have to do some good things to them. Because they're watching us. Listen to this. Jesus says this. He says, if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. Even normal people do that. Even you and I are nice to the people who are nice to us, aren't we? But love, Jesus says, your enemies. Now, this is important because while I know most of us would like to think we don't have any enemies in our life, the fact is our lives are filled with the people Jesus is talking about being our enemies. They're the ones we don't love. They're the ones who smell different than us, look different than us, act different than us. These are the people, they might not even live where we live. They might not be Anglo. They might not be here legally. They might not even be Christian. They might be Muslim. They might be people who want you dead. Or they might be the person who wants to destroy your life financially. We all have enemies. Most of us go through our lives ignoring them, hoping they'll go away. But I'm going to tell you right now, that doesn't happen very often. Jesus says, love your enemies, do good to them, lend to them without expecting to get anything back, and then your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, because God is kind. Be merciful, just as your heavenly Father is merciful. We get nervous with words like this, because our world taught us to say things like, when people hurt you, hurt them back. Now, we never quite put it in those terms, but I'll bet you've heard these words. I don't get mad, I get... And you never say that about your friend. I never say that about my friends. And God says no, because that is a reaction, not an action. God says, forgive them. God says, be merciful to them. God says, well, how do we do that? Well, here's the good news. Being merciful is really it only takes two things. You ready? Two things. And the first one is a name. Do you have that weirdo in your life? That special person has a name. He has a name. She has a name. Pay attention to him. See how easy that was to be merciful? Name the person. And pay attention. Is there someone in your life that you need to forgive? Name the person and forgive them. How easy is that? Is there someone who needs your help? There are two things you need to do. Put a name with it and help them. Do you have an enemy? Put a name to them and love them. I've never preached such an easy, simple sermon in my whole life. Put a name and an action. Put a name and a way to love them. Put a name and pay attention. Put a name and forgive them. And that's how you do mercy. So blessed are the merciful. Blessed are those who can put a name to an action. I love it when Scripture is that simple. And you might ask why. Why should we? It's simple. First, because God showed mercy to me. And secondly, because I'm going to need more mercy tomorrow. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Amen. I'm going to invite you to